right, let's start to wrap the show. A couple other results from the weekend that was in college basketball, outside of coaches actually taking swings at each other. And let's start in the SEC, because in terms of the actual results on the court that mattered on Saturday and on Sunday, I don't think there was a single bigger one than what happened in Gainesville, Florida, where the Auburn Tigers walked in as the number 2 team in the country, only team in college basketball that had not lost a game in regulation this year. They were 24-2 coming in, both losses in overtime or double overtime to UConn and Arkansas. And then on Saturday, they take the L, final score 63-62 in Gainesville. And so I want to talk about Auburn because I don't think their season's over. I don't think it's time to freak out. But what I would say is I do think we're starting to get to the point a little bit with Auburn where it is fair to kind of ask, like, okay, are we sure this team is as good as we thought they were? Are there reasons to be concerned? All that good stuff. So let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about Florida. My boy Mike White doing his amazing end-of-year thing to save his job. But before we even get to it, let me give me 2 minutes to do a quick rant on something else. And if you're a longtime listener to this show, you've heard me do this rant before. But every year in college basketball puts out about 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the regular season, and that's where we are, basically a mock bracket similar to what college football does, right? College football every Tuesday for about 3 or 4 weeks before the conference championship games, they put out the mock Final Four. They give out their top 25. It becomes a big made-for-TV production. We all love it. And about 3 or 4 years ago, college basketball decided to do the same thing. 2-3 weeks before the end of the regular season, college basketball decides, you know what? Let's do that too. Let's put out a mock bracket. We'll do the top 4 seed lines, and we'll rank the top 16 teams. If the NCAA tournament started today, this is what it would look like. And so Saturday was the day that they did that. But what drives me crazy about this process, and I have talked about it on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast before. I know I did a rant last year. What drives me crazy is the NCAA Selection Committee decides to put out the bracket on Saturday morning before a full weekend of college basketball. And so rather than putting it out, I don't know, on a Sunday, because 1, you actually do it on Sunday after a full weekend of basketball, or 2, put it out on Sunday so that it actually creates a talking point for shows like this, for Field of 68, for ESPN, for Fox Sports, for whoever covers college basketball. They put it out on Saturday, and it becomes completely useless by Sunday because a bunch of games happen that shake up the results. And so I bring it up because there was no bigger result that would have shook up that bracket if they had just waited till Sunday than what happened on Saturday at Gainesville, where Auburn lost to Florida. And so first of all, in terms of the game itself, a couple things. 1, if you're an Auburn fan, you don't have to freak out, right? And I think there's 2 kind of camps at Auburn. One is saying, okay, it's starting to get a little sketchy here. Should I be worried? And I think there's another camp that sits there and says, you know what? We're 24-3. We control our own destiny for the SEC regular season title. We control our own destiny for a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Everything is ahead of us. And by the way, I would say a lot of people feel that way, right? We just started a Torres on Auburn account. If you're an Auburn fan, go ahead and follow that. And the kid who runs it, his name's Matthew, great young Auburn student that's been doing an awesome job with that account. That's exactly his point. He's like, we're Auburn basketball. We're 24-3. We're in line to get a number 1 seed. What are we complaining about? And I certainly don't think a loss at Florida is overly concerning if you're Auburn, if you know the history of the if you want to call it a rivalry or a matchup between the 2 schools. Auburn, and this is incredible, has not won at Florida since 1996, okay? Bruce Pearl, since he got to Auburn, he's been to a Final Four. He's won an SEC regular season title. He's won an SEC tournament title. He has never won at Florida, so that shows you how weird this rivalry is. But I also think you do have to start being concerned with Auburn a little bit if you are just a bigger, broader college basketball fan. I tend to lean with, no, you don't have to worry about this game. It's like I said last week when Kentucky lost to Tennessee, or when Auburn lost to Arkansas, or when Providence lost to Villanova. Sometimes good teams just lose in February in conference play. But what I would also say is I do think there are some disturbing trends if you're Auburn and if you're a team that has real aspirations to win the NCAA tournament. First of all, like, we now have a track record that's about a month and a half long. Auburn really isn't that good. At least they haven't been of late away from Auburn Arena. Here is what Auburn has done in their last 4 road games since they became the number 1 ranked team in the country. They beat Missouri by 1 point, 55-54. Then they picked up 2 home wins. Then they went to Georgia and won by 2. Then they lost at Arkansas. Then they had 2 home wins. And then they lost to Florida. So in their last 4 road games, they are 2-2 overall. And then on top of that, their 2 wins are by a combined 1 point and 2 points. So they're by a combined 3 points, one win by 1 point, one win by 2 points against the 2 worst teams in the SEC. So we now have a track record that they're really struggling away from home. And what I think is becoming increasingly concerning if you're an Auburn fan is that even at home, the Tigers haven't played their best basketball. Yes, they beat Vanderbilt 94-80 the other day. But if you watch that game, first of all, Vanderbilt, another team that's not very good. But if you watch that game, Auburn fell down 11-0 and 14-3 in that game, okay? So even at home, they have not been playing as well. And it just feels like we are now in about what? A 5-week, 3-week, 4-week, whatever sample where this team is not playing its best basketball. Now, part of it I know was injuries. Part of it I understand. It's not easy having the target on your back. But what I would also say is I do think they appear to be hitting a wall. And this is something that happens sometimes in college basketball, right? I think back to a few years ago. A weird example to use when it comes to Auburn because Bruce Pearl coached here too. But do you remember about 2.5, 3 years ago, Tennessee, the year they had Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams, one year they win the SEC regular season title. They come back the following year, the entire team completely intact for the most part. Grant Williams, Jordan Bone, Admiral Schofield, Lamonte Turner, all those guys. And there was about a 5-6 week stretch where they looked very clearly like the definitive number 1 team in the country. I remember we had Jimmy Dykes on this show. We talked about it, and he was like, dude, I haven't seen a team like them all year long. And then the season went on, and then as the season wore down, they just felt like they lost some of that mojo. They weren't playing quite as well late in the season. And that's kind of how I feel about Auburn. I also think it's fair to wonder, the guards, and this is not a criticism of them, but they seem to be slowing down a little bit. You go back to the Florida game on Saturday. You go back to that Florida game. Zeb Jasper, their point guard, just returned from injury, so it's hard to really gauge him. But KD Johnson, who has been so great all year, averaging 13 points per game, he has not been himself as of late. Finished with 12 points, but didn't shoot particularly well from the field. 7 points the game before, 3 points in the loss to Arkansas. He is not playing, I don't believe, his best basketball. Wendell Green, the guard who transferred in from Eastern Kentucky, I don't believe is playing his best basketball, averaging 12.5 points per game this season, but only 5 against Florida. So listen, I'm not saying it's time to sell all your Auburn stock. I'm not saying they can't rally, but what I am saying is late February, it feels like there's always a couple teams that have been awesome all year that start to run out of steam. And this Auburn team feels like that.